I am so happy right now because I finally get to make the Hollow Knight quality analysis. I have wanted to make this video for a very long time since I first played the game, and I was so excited about it with all the different DLCs coming out. I've watched videos discussing it, getting into the lore and the theories and all that stuff. And the only reason I didn't do this earlier was actually because I wanted the last DLC to come out with the Hornet to find out what else there was left of the lore. But now that's going to be a whole nother game, so naturally here we are. I finally get to talk about Hollow Knight. Yes! So Hollow Knight, this is going to be very comprehensive. Hollow Knight is basically, it's a Metroidvania that, in simplest forms, you could say is a combination of Ori and the Blind Forest and Dark Souls, and a little bit of everything that you'd expect in a Metroidvania. Dark Souls in the sense of its like combat and progression and difficulty, and Ori in the general way that the world works and is framed and the mechanics and the crispness of it and stuff like that. Now, I've already talked about Ori. I've never played Dark Souls, so I'm a bit ignorant in the comparisons I'll make. But that's just like a very typical thing with the way people describe Hollow Knight. The general gist of where my thoughts are is that Hollow Knight is basically like perfect. Like it's essentially a perfect example of what it is, and in so many ways it does things that much better than games like Ori and the Blind Forest and even other Metroidvania games. I'm going to get into the specifics of what I mean by that, but suffice it to say is that I hold this whole thing in very high regard. It's a very well done, basically like a masterpiece in its own right. So yeah, we're gonna go down the list. Like I said, the mechanics are very crisp, which you need for this type of game. It's like Ori and the Blind Forest in that sense. There's less jumping than in Ori, but it's still very fluid. You have the ability to dash, you have the ability to double jump, and basically grab every single surface that's there. And that's just like the bare minimum of what would even make a game like this tolerable, because if this was not crisp, if this was somehow clunky, this game would be virtually unplayable, because it's not an easy game, on top of being very big, on top of having lots of things to do, so thank God that they actually got that right. Now, so the difference between, I guess, the difference between Hollow Knight, I'd say, and the other Metroidvanias, at least the other Metroidvanias I've played most of the 2D Metroids and Ori and the Blind Forest, obviously. Not too much besides that, but the difference between Hollow Knight and all of those is that it has all the same exploration mechanics. The difference is the amount of combat that it has. The combat system in Hollow Knight is far more complex and developed than it is in those games. Usually, combat systems in like Metroid games, they're very basic. You just shoot, and there's nuances to it, but it's like it's you aim and shoot. That's the bare minimum of it. Here, you have this whole charm system, and there's all kinds of nuances to how that works and how you want which charm setup you want to take, and of course, there's a whole lot of really. Like, the combat is a whole nother section of this game, in that it basically, like, you're exploring and you're moving around, and a lot of the time you just hit things with a sword and they go away. But then there's moments where you actually have to pause and straight up think about how you're going to fight bosses, because the boss fights, they're a whole other sector as far as, like, the amount of time and thought that goes into them in order to beat them. So the exploration mechanics are actually very balanced in the sense that it's not just about exploration. There's exploration and combat, and both of these things operate at similar levels in terms of how much of the experience they encompass. So, yeah, so that's the thing. It's like the thing that I'm going to emphasize with this game is that Hollow Knight tries to do a little bit of everything, right? It has a lot of both. It doesn't just have one and a little bit of the other, which is usually how I think Metroidvanias work. And so with Ori, it's the same thing. There's lots of exploration in Ori, and there's some level progression, but that's not the main point. That stuff is just kind of there to make things smoother. The exploration is the main point. But here, the exploration and the combat and the world building, all of these things exist in vast quantities. So the only the only real flaw, I don't know if this is a flaw. I'm gonna get into like the way it's constructed is a little problematic, and this is probably why Hollow Knight hasn't reached the same tier as games like Ori and Metroid at this point, even though it's been out for as much. Is that the game is not easy to get into. It's not very beginner friendly. I mean, you would basically have to be like already sort of an experienced gamer, or at least having played Metroidvanias in order to get into this game, because it's a very like get good type game. When I was playing it on stream, I would always have, one of my friends would always just say, like, you just got to get good. You just got to get good. And it seems really hard at first because you will die over and over again. But it's not. Like, you can actually get good. The game is designed for you to be able to get good, but you're not going to be good when you start. And especially if you play a game like Super Metroid, where you can just collect tons of health, you can tank things. You can't do that here. You are not, even when you collect health upgrades, you still don't want to be tanking things, right? This is not a game, this is a game where you really want to learn to avoid getting hit. That's probably the Dark Souls element that everyone talks about. I actually remember the first time I played the game, I went down the well, and I just kept going left, and the first enemy I encountered was a husk guard. And he was guarding one of the grubs, and the husk guard does 2 masks of damage. And that's the first enemy I saw. That's what I mean about not being like beginner friendly. That's not an easy thing to just start with, right? But the good thing about it is that the skill ceiling's actually really high. Like, you'd start the game and you might think it's really difficult, but it scales really far. Like, you learn this if you ever replay it, which is that things that seemed hard on the first playthrough really stop seeming hard. You really learn how the bosses and things work just by going through it. And the things that you have to do to unlock some of the content at the very end of the game are like ridiculous. Like, they're hard enough to the point where most people probably wouldn't even do them, because it would take dozens of hours of grinding. And I have like 300 hours in this game at this point, so I've played this game more than any other Metroidvania game, right? And part of the reason is that it's so big, which I'll get to later. But yeah, the point is that the difficulty really does scale high. So the point being is that it's not just an exploration game. It's a game you can actually get good at. Almost like a rhythm or a skill game or something like that. So I'm just looking through my notes. Yeah, Huskguard. So the charm system. I guess I'll talk about the charm system. The combat itself is just generally like. I have kind of a love-hate relationship to it, and I noticed this because I was also watching people play through the game whilst also going through it, and a lot of if you don't know how Metroidvanias work, first of all, you will definitely find this difficult. I had a few friends who were trying to go through the game, and what was happening is that they kept trying to go into areas where they weren't supposed to because they didn't have the right movement tech and upgrades to get through the certain areas. Like, they didn't have the crystal dash, and they kept trying to go into areas that you needed the crystal dash to get through. And they kept dying and losing their shade and having to lose their money. And I was just like, oh my god, that's not how you do this. So you have to know how a Metroidvania works, is that there's things you're not supposed to be able to do at the beginning that you're supposed to backtrack and do later on. That's how they're designed. The thing about Hollow Knight, is that it's more punishing with that, because it also has the whole Dark Souls thing where you lose all your money when you die and part of your soul meter. So, you really don't want to screw up. That's what I mean about, you need to. This is what's like. This is the challenge of Hollow Knight, which is that if you said, let's combine Metroidvania with a friggin' Dark Souls style punishing gameplay, people would say, well, that's ridiculous, because you don't want to be punished in a platformer like that, unless it's a punishing platformer, that's a whole different category. But you don't want to be punished when you want to explore, right? It's counterintuitive, right? Well, that's only true if the person who's playing the game doesn't know how they're supposed to play in order to... Basically, that's only true if the person who's playing the game doesn't know how they're supposed to explore, right? When you're exploring, you are supposed to, if you know how these games work, you know when you're supposed to explore something and when you don't. You're used to the dynamics. So you're not going to find the punishing aspects of, you're not going to go into areas and die over and over again like you would in a different Metroidvania game, because you know how it works. And so you're not going to be penalized with the Dark Souls like mechanic of losing your money and soul and stuff like that. The point being is that the game is sort of designed for experts, or it's designed for people who are not experts but are experienced in this style. That's probably, again, I would predict that's part of the reason why Hollow Knight didn't do as well as it could have, even though on every technical aspect it's so well made. So yeah, the charm system. The charm system is the charm system is really balanced and, well, sorry, the charm system is really cool. Just for starters, it's a really nice way of sort of adding this like extra layer of customization on top of progression, on top of making your character better and stronger and being able to fight enemies and have more of an advantage in the same progression system that, you know, other Metroidvanias usually have, without necessarily being just a pure RPG, which is sort of what Ori did, and it wasn't that interesting. The charm system is actually like, it's more like you have this arsenal of weapons that you can just, or this arsenal of passive upgrades that you can just, you know, put on every once in a while depending on the situation, right? So it's a neat little idea, and I think it fits the general character of the game perfectly. A basic progression system would, I don't know, it's not impossible to do that. I would just prefer, if you're going to have a progression system, if it's a game like Ori and the Blind Forest, but so it's like a Metroidvania game, but you have a progression system, I prefer that the progression system be somehow more tailored into the, like, just well integrated into the general mechanics, right? With Metroidvanias, it's usually, what do you do is you upgrade your health, you upgrade your capacity, you know, you upgrade the size of your, you know, your ammo upgrades in Metroid, etc. Here you have charm notches as well. It just like, it fits the style very well without getting into too much RPG-ness. The other thing I wanted to mention about the charm system is that the charm system is really balanced, surprisingly balanced. So to explain what I mean, I'm a completionist, so whenever I see a game that gives you this whole arsenal of things to use, I want to use everything. That's sort of my approach, is like, I want to make sure that everything is useful. And it pisses me off when it's not well done, when there's this whole arsenal, but most of the stuff in the arsenal is completely useless. Like, it's at that point, I'm having to sit there and force myself to use things that aren't actually useful whatsoever. And I had to do that a little bit in this game, but I was still pleasantly surprised, because a lot of the time, charms that you wouldn't think are that useful actually do end up being useful in certain situations, right? It's actually kind of neat. So they're not all equally useful. They're not all equally useful. Some of them are definitely more useful for, like, and more beginner friendly for people who are new to the game, like the compass and being able to pick up money. Well, not being able to pick up money, being able to avoid getting hit for longer and stuff like that. But some of them are very, like, uniquely tailored to specific fights, and it's interesting because the charms keep surprising you in how useful they are, right? You get to this. You would think the most useful charms are just the basic combat ones, like extending the length of your nail and your quick slash and stuff like that. But like I said, there was at least 4 or 5 charms that I thought, well, these, what the fuck? Like, who cares about this? And then they ended up being very specifically useful in certain situations, and I was pleasantly surprised. The best example of that is Hive Blood. When you pick up Hive Blood, I'm like, oh wow, this is a charm that regenerates your health. That's awesome. But then I put it on, and it's like, oh wait, it only regenerates 1 heart. That's not useful. It only regenerates 1 mask. How is that useful? But then you get to the White Palace, and the White Palace is an area where there's basically no enemies. There's just platforming. And each time that you fail a platforming section, you lose exactly 1 heart, and you go to a safe spot. So what that means is that that Hive Blood is perfect there, because it just regenerates that 1 health, and you can try again, right? It's perfectly designed for that particular area, right? Another good example of this is Shape of Un. Shape of Un looks like a totally useless charm. It just like, it makes you small when you're healing. But then there's one place, one of my viewers on stream found a strat for fighting Nightmare King Grim, where you use Shape of Un along with Quick Heal and the Double Healing Charm to heal when Nightmare King is shooting bats at you, because you become small, you duck underneath the bats, and it's like, oh wow, that's such a cool little strat, and it actually makes that fight a lot easier for beginner players. I find a lot of the charms are uniquely useful when you're new. Some of the charms that, when you're really good at the game and you know exactly how the game works, you're probably going to use the same charms over and over again. Like, you're going to use, at least I use, like, Mark of Pride and Quick Slash and Unbreakable Strength and all that stuff over and over again, because it's the most reliable, and I love wailing on the enemies. Also, Flukeness is another example. You see Flukeness, it's like, well, this is the same charm, but with less range. Why would I use this? But it does a shit ton of damage, right? There's all these, like, all of the advantages that the charms have. Oh, the summoning charms as well are a good example. There's one section in the resting grounds where you need to dodge. If you want to dream nail all of the spirits, the dude starts attacking you, and you need to block him. And there's a specific charm that summons those little, like, I forget that those firefly things that actually block his attacks. Right? It's perfectly designed for that particular section. It's awesome. There's so many little scenarios like that. My point being is, like, it's well done, and it's so nice to see a game that does this, where you actually have a arsenal of things, a large arsenal that is all useful. Everything's not equally useful. That's fine. That's never going to be the case, but everything does feel significant in and of itself from time to time. That part is good. So, the boss fights. So the boss fights are generally... They're generally, again, like Ori and the Blind Forest didn't have boss fights, obviously, so the boss fight stuff is far more Dark Souls-y. You really need to learn to dodge in order to do all the boss fights. That's the basic challenge. The way that all of the boss fights are designed is you're going to die when you fight the boss for the first time, right? And you're going to die many times until you learn their pattern. That's the one negative thing you can say about it, is that that formula is consistent throughout the whole game, right? If you don't know the game, you will die to these bosses over and over again. There's no way not to. They're designed for you to die. It's only a thing, it's like, once you have to learn the pattern, and learning the pattern always takes time. Once you learn the pattern, you can avoid the boss just fine. But the point is, you can't ever really beat a boss just by having the right upgrades or the right amount of health or anything like that. Your tools don't carry you. Your ability to dodge and weave and fight the boss carries you. This is consistent, and this is what gets into the frustrating aspect of Hollow Knight, which is that you're going to die a lot of times. Like, it doesn't matter how good of a player you are. Look at the Radiance fight at the end of the game. You're going to die to that fight over and over again. You're going to have to repeat it. You're supposed to die. It's like an I Want to Be the Guy fan game in that sense, only not as brutal, obviously, but you are supposed to die. And I guess you need to just be okay with that aspect of it in order to play it. You need to be aware and stop thinking that death is a bad thing, and just really get the sense, like, no, I need to go in here and die a bunch of times to learn the pattern. The good thing about the boss fights is all the boss fights are really different and interesting and unique, and they all have their own little they all have their own little patterns. They all have their own little gimmicks. Some of the gimmicks are cool. There's a few attacks that repeat themselves pretty often. Like the spinning swords attack that several bosses have and stuff like that. But yeah, most of the bosses are, I guess they're not as memorable as certain bosses in like other Metroid games, because I just keep comparing it to Metroid games for some reason, but they're they feel significant enough in their own right. And if you play the Godmaster DLC, then you really get to learn about these bosses and how all of them work. Some of them, to name, I'll just name a few, I'd say are a little not well designed, especially if you try to do the Radiant battles in Godmaster, which I did, by the way, all of them except Absolute Radiance. Oblobble, the Oblobble fight, and Markoth are not well-designed fights for the Radiant difficulty in Godmaster. I'm sorry, but they're just not. Oblobble fight is not designed for you to not get hit. It's just like, I think it took me like 7 or 8 hours to do that fight. Maybe I was using a bad strat, but still, it's just like, the fight, you're in a small arena with these giant enemies that shoot things in all directions. You have to be a god to dodge them. It's almost like it's designed for tasks. Markoth is the same thing. Now, Markoth is actually a reasonable fight when you have in his normal arena. He's an asshole when you have to fight him in the stupid-ass Godmaster arena where, you know, it's over empty space. And there's just so many things in that fight that can kill you. That fight also took me like 6 or 7 hours at least. I was so happy when I beat him. So yeah, screw Markoth and screw the Oblobble fight. But yeah, all the other boss fights, they're all pretty cool. I think they're all themed after bugs, because everything in this game is based on bugs. So they ramp up in like how epic they are, especially near the end. Some of the boss fights, some of the stronger boss fights are just like basically gods, and when you fight them, you feel very, well, you feel like you're fighting something just like supernatural and godlike. I guess the general thing is like there's not much to say other than they're all well designed. They all do different things that fit, and they all have their own little characteristics to them as well. So the boss fights are cool. I want to mention the Radiance fight specifically, which was like my favorite fight in the game. Radiance, absolute or normal, either one. Because what happens with every boss fight is it's like Dark Souls, where you know you have the name of the boss. The name of the boss pops up on screen as you begin the boss fight, and this happens with every single boss. When you get to Radiance, the entire screen goes white, and you just says Radiance, and it's like, fuck, like you know you're up against something really big because it's completely different from everything else. It's like the whole game announces to you who you're up against. That fight is really epic. I'm gonna get into like some of the specifics of that fight later, but also the other thing I want to say about the Radiance fight, it's cool how some of the bosses have phases. Obviously, that's again very typical Metroid-y thing as well. The Radiance fight was really hard without being unfair. There are a few things in it that are kind of unfair, like sword RNG, but other than that, I'd say the fight is basically fair, and the phases really do elevate it. Like, the fight feels more epic with every phase, even though some of the later phases are really not, like, the phases 2 and 3 aren't as hard as phase 1, I'd say. But yeah, I really like that fight. So moving on. So I guess the biggest thing that you'll notice about Hollow Knight, the most obvious thing you could say about one of the biggest aspects of this game is just how big it is. The game is enormous. It's like compared to an average Metroidvania, Super Metroid, or Ori, or anything really, any game that's of this style, they're usually not this big, and it's not big because it's hard. Like, it doesn't take the average gameplay. You can spend 30-40 hours just going through this game and exploring everything. That's how big it is. Part of that is due to the difficulty, but the other part of that is that the game is so damn big. Like, it's literally bigger than any other Metroid. Well, it's only bigger than any Metroidvania I've played. Obviously, I don't know how many others there are out there, but it's really well done. I say that when it comes to size, it's good if it justifies itself. Now, basically, what that means is basically bigger is better if everything else is held equal. If the quality density of every moment in the game is good, then making that game bigger is just inherently better because it's just the same quality density over more time and space, and gameplay content. So it's just more quality, right? You think about it as sort of like, you can think about it mathematically, actually. Well, as like multiplying, the area of a bunch of squares to get the area underneath a curve or something, like fucking integral calculus. That's a weird tangent. But the point is, if you have a sense that the core experience of the game is good, if the game is also big, that's just better because it's that core quality experience that's enjoyable, multiplied over time to play the entire game. That's what makes the game really good. I mentioned how the charm system feels. I mentioned how the charm system. The charm system feels. There's nothing in the charm system that's vestigial. That's a big aspect of what makes big games difficult. Usually with games that are big, I'm thinking of Assassin's Creed games, there's something that feels vestigial or there's something that feels incomplete, right? Like it's a big game, but it's empty, right? There's not a lot of stuff in it. Or it's a big game, but there's all these elements that are just unnecessary and don't add anything and just clutter things up. Hollow Knight has neither of those. It's incredibly tight and polished, and every single aspect of it adds to it in one way or another. I want to mention the Hunter's Journal on this one, right? I love the fact that there's a Hunter's Journal. The basic philosophy for this, they want to say this is completionism, right? And I'm a completionist, and I love the completionist philosophy. And this game is a completionist game. It's quite clearly, it was like designed with the completionist philosophy in mind. Everything, there's just loads and loads of content that you are meant to complete, right? The game is so big, there's so many places to go, there's so many places to do, there's so many optional things to do, there's so many optional things to look at, it screams of that idea that like more is better if all of the things fit together in sort of a sensical, logical way, which they do, right? The charm system feels very complete. It's like every single thing that you might think of that could be an advantage in a game like this where you're a little knight that hits things with a sword is there, right? Every single, summons, there. Ability to upgrade your damage, there. Ability to, upgrade your health and tankiness, that's there. Your magic, check. Everything is, passive abilities with healing, summoning abilities, etc. All of that stuff is there. Check. There's a map system, and you can put optional things on the map, and you can actually get tokens that you put on the map to mark all the interesting, all the relevant points on the map. You have the journal entry, which keeps track of all of the enemies in the game and as well as a few optional objectives that you can complete, which in and of itself is another completionist thing. Honestly, there's another screen that keeps track of all the possible items that you can get. Basically, what I mean is that like everything that you could imagine that might ever be useful in a game like this is there, right? The ability to, hot springs where you can refill your soul meter. The ability to just refill your soul meter when you're sitting on a bench from Salubra's upgrade. The ability to double jump. It's like they thought of every little thing that might be useful and put it in, right? The ability to regain your soul if you want to using a rod and egg. Everything is there. The ability to just buy all kinds of upgrades. I want to stress, it's like every single thing of element of polish that you could think of that's there is actually there. Usually, if you look at Ori and the Blind Forest, or if you look at, other games, is that very often it might feel like there's something missing, or something's a little basic, or something, it doesn't quite justify necessarily how it feels. Some parts might feel boring, some parts might feel incomplete, some things might feel vestigial. This doesn't have that. The game has everything you might want in this type of experience. That's what's so impressive about all this. This is why I hypothesize that they were using the completionist philosophy when they were designing it, because it's very relevant. The only thing this game honestly doesn't have is a quest tracker. And the only reason it has that is because there aren't really any quests in the game. There's just a bunch of optional objectives that involve collecting things and looking at dialogue. But yeah, the only thing the game really wouldn't have. But that's more of an RPG element, which this game's not an RPG. The point being, it's just like it keeps track. It's really self-aware. It keeps track of all of its own content, and it presents all of it to you in a way that's optional, that you can go and find it. Another nice nuance, like there's a difference whenever you hit something with your sword. There's different animations depending on whether you get soul or not. There's also a different animation depending on whether or not you hit a breakable wall. If you hit a non-breakable wall, there's just the small little like white flash on the screen. When you hit a breakable wall, there's a large one. That's how you know when the wall is breakable. The breakable walls also have a different visual appearance to them. They have, sometimes, some of them look normal, but most of them have a very obvious, like visual difference. You could see the cracks in them. You know, there's the ability to farm money, right? Is in the game. The ability to take your unbreakable charms and breakable charms and make them unbreakable. The ability to have arena fights. The ability to do a boss rush. All of that stuff's in the game. Everything you might think of that might fit is basically already there. The only thing that they could do more is just make the world bigger and add more characters and shit. That's what I mean with completionism. It covers all of it covers every avenue of gameplay, every avenue of every avenue of gameplay, every avenue of a UI that keeps track of all the content, every avenue of presentation, every avenue of experiencing the things that are in the game and how you want to accrue resources if you need to. The ability to store money in a bank, right, is also in the game. Well, that one's kind of a joke if you if you go through it. But the point is, anything, there's all these convenience features. See, some of them need to be unlocked by going through them. Some of them cost money, like putting pins on the map. Some of them, Salubra's upgrade needs to be bought. Friggin' rotten eggs need to be found. A lot of things you need to work to get the convenience features, but the fact is they're in the game to begin with. It's so friggin' nice that everything you might think of that could ever be useful is somehow accessible in a legitimate friggin' I'll tell you why this is so important for me. Because very often in fucking games like this, they don't have something and it feels very relevant, like it's missing. Like, for example, there's a bunch of doors in Hollow Knight that require a simple key. Now, another game, what it might do is it might have only one simple key in it, but you want to open both doors, but you can't, so you have to make a choice, right? And that always pisses me off, right? The only time it wouldn't piss me off is if the game was designed around having to make those kinds of choices. You're not supposed to get all the upgrades, right? Hollow Knight isn't designed that way. You are supposed to get all the upgrades. You are supposed to be able to get everything and use everything if you want. You just have to work for it. I love that. That's far more sensible, especially for this type of style of game. Another game, what it might do is you might have the ability to open both doors, and you might have the number of keys to open both doors, but one of the keys becomes inaccessible once you progress farther enough through the game. That's a really annoying feature. Whenever you have something in a game that would be useful later on, but you either miss an item or you forget to pick it up, or you go through an area and you miss something, you can't get it again. Right? The Witcher games do this a lot. Friggin' Ori and the Blind Forest does this as well. There are upgrades in the dungeon areas that if you don't get, you don't get them, you can't get them again because the dungeon areas become inaccessible. The same, actually, that happened to me when I played Ori in the Lost Woods or whatever, the Spooky Woods. I missed an upgrade, and I didn't even know that was a dungeon. The point is, it's a super annoying thing. If the game is meant or designed in a way where you can get everything, then there should not be any clunky elements with getting everything, right? There should be no way to miss something permanently and having to, because you didn't know how the game worked, which is how it usually works. I can understand in RPGs or certain games where you're supposed to make choices and give something up, but that's there in the design. When it's not designed that way, when the idea is that, no, you are supposed to get everything because you're supposed to experience everything, because it's a completionist game, you can do that, right? Then make it all accessible, right? And don't have these artificial barriers and walls that pop up, making it impossible to get things because you didn't know the game to begin with. Hollow Knight has none of this, and the best example of this is actually the Hunter's Journal, right? I've already brought up keys and dungeons and stuff, but the best example of this is the Hunter's Journal, because this is one of the places I noticed this, because what happens partway through the game is that the Forgotten Crossroads becomes the Infected Crossroads. And when it does, all of the enemies in the Forgotten Crossroads change. Most of them, some of them disappear completely and stop spawning. Some of them become infected variants of the enemies. And when the infected variants, they have a different, they give you a different entry in the journal. And what made me worried when I got to the Forgotten Crossroads was, oh shit, I don't have some of the upgrades. I don't have some of the journal entries, because the way it works is you have a journal entry and you can complete it by killing a certain number of that enemy. I didn't have all the journal entries completed for all the enemies from the Forgotten Crossroads, which are now infected variants. But here's how fucking genius Hollow Knight is. Every single original Forgotten Crossroads enemy still spawns in at least one room somewhere in the Forgotten Crossroads. There's always one place where at least one enemy of that type still spawns. They did that on purpose because they knew you should still have the ability to get those journal entries even if you got to this part of the game. I know they did that on purpose, and I love that they did that. I'm so happy they did that, because what that means is they thought of completionism when they put this in. Right, you have the ability to complete it no matter what. You might have to go in and out of that room 10, 20 times, but you can still do it. You're not penalized for not having known what would happen when it became the Infected Crossroads. I love that. I absolutely friggin' love that. It's such a small thing, but it makes me so happy, because it means the game cares about you getting to get access to every single thing that's in it. It's amazing. And again, there's no vestigial elements to the completionism as well, right? Assassin's Creed games, I just finished playing friggin' Assassin's Creed Unity. I should have brought this up when I talked about the charm system, but in some Assassin's Creed games, like Unity, you have a whole slew of weapons and shit, but it's all useless. Most of it doesn't help or add that much. You end up using the same thing if you would just wanted to go through the game casually. That's where Hollow Knight is different, is that it really forces you, or at least challenges you in trying a lot of different things. Oh, so that's what I mean, is like the game is completionisty, and it justifies its own size because, nothing feels vestigial and nothing feels incomplete. Now, all of these are just like mechanical issues. Hold on. I just want to jump back to the Hunter's Journal. The only time that the Hunter's Journal completionist thing was annoying was the moss skin enemy. The moss skin enemy, there's volatile moss skin and normal moss skin. Normal moss skin spawn in like 2 or 3 places, and having to farm like 30 of them is a pain in the ass. I remember having to do that, and every single time, I've played through the game like 6 times at this point, every single time that's a pain in the ass. That's the only one that they did wrong, right? And I think the reason is they could have added volatile moss skin after the Forgotten Crossroads became infected, but I guess they didn't do that because they thought people wouldn't go through Green Path that many times to fight the volatile moss skin. I don't know. The point is, it would have actually been cooler if more of the world became infected as you go through the game. Like, as you unlock more Dreamers, the world generally becomes more infected, but that would have been pretty hard to do, and it would have made things really complicated. I don't know. I'm jumping around a lot of my points, as you can tell, but other than the one Moskin thing, I think the journal completionist thing was really nice. It also helps keep track of objectives like the Path of Pain and the Radiant battles, and which adds a completionist marker to those challenges, which is good, because otherwise you get no completionist marker and it would feel less satisfying. Like the fact that doing the Path of Pain unlocks a journal entry makes it feel more significant than if you just went through it and there was nothing. So, again, I've just covered like it from the mechanical perspective. Let's talk about atmosphere and visuals. This game has a lot of atmosphere. A lot of atmosphere. A lot of that is probably in the soundtrack, which is really good, which really emphasizes the ambiance, the emotions, the mystery of it, the soft piano tones emphasizing like what exactly this sort of like somber curiosity and what happened to this old painful, decaying kingdom. So that's good. Like I said, the atmosphere is there. The visual style is very impressive. I honestly, I don't know how two people managed to design this thing. Obviously, visually speaking, it's not the most fucking... It's not Ori and the Blind Forest. One thing that Ori has over Hollow Knight is that Ori's way more visually... Like, you can look at any frame of Ori and the Blind Forest is like a wallpaper tier. It's wallpaper tier in quality. Hollow Knight doesn't have that. Nonetheless, there are a lot of very interesting things in the way that the visuals work. The art style is very engaging. The different regions all feel very different, and you see really cool things in the background a lot of times. There's many times, like the Queen's Gardens and Green Path and Fog, like that whole area specifically is very visually appealing. There's a lot of detail there for within the constraints of the style that they pick, which is kind of this, like, you know, it's kind of this sort of dark cartoony style, which it works pretty well for it fits very well with all the sort of thematic and gameplay elements the game has as well. There's also sections of like the Abyss and the Ancient Basin, and where the visual style really does like create a very imposing sense of atmosphere. I remember that one area where you get one of the lifeblood charms, and there's just like this face in the background that has eyeballs that's, you know, popping up in the darkness, and it's super friggin' creepy. And the City of Tears is like, you know, one of the an amazing visual shot is when you go to fight Soul Master for the first time and you see him like flying in from the background. Really cool. So they use that stuff to their advantage. The visuals are good, is what I'm trying to say. The atmosphere is also there because of the visuals, combined with the music, combined with the general sense of like loneliness. You're often alone. There's not a lot of life there's not a lot of like, there's a lot of like creatures that try to attack you, and there's a lot of dangerous things, but there's not a lot of like NPC interactions or stuff like that. So much so that when you actually find an NPC that's just sitting there that you can talk to, it actually feels nice. It's like, oh, hey, you, what's up? You know, it's like everyone feels friendly because they're not trying to kill you, because most things are trying to kill you. And like I said, with the music and the style of enemy, the enemy styles are also very well tailored with the region that they're in. Again, this is another Metroidvania thing that works really well. One thing that I was bored with in Ori is that Ori just has this kind of thing where, like, basically all the enemies are just this, like, purple blob things that jump around, and you get kind of bored of them. There are differences, obviously, but you know, you get the point. But here, everything is very detailed, you know, to the region, the character, the specific thing that's going on. I still remember like, some of them are really interesting too. There are enemies in the game that aren't killable, which is a unique concept, but you can still get journal entries for them, which, by the way, that's another great aspect of completionism, because I remember you have that in Metroid, Super Metroid too, is you have unkillable enemies that are just sort of obstacles, like the Guams. In Hollow Knight, it's the Guams in the Forgotten Crossroads, or the Garpedes in Deep Nest, the Lumafly things. You can't kill them, but you can still learn about them, which is really cool. And of course, they fit with the region that they're in. You know, the Guams are in like the abandoned, you know, road areas where no one's around. The Garpedes are in Deep Nest. The Lumaflies are in like the jungly, like foresty biome, etc. Hidden rooms, again, adding to the atmosphere thing, in the sense of exploration in this game is so friggin' deep, and it's deep because of just how far it can go. Like, there are things you can discover in Hollow Knight that are not discoverable in any other game to that extent, but you wouldn't think that these kinds of things would even be discoverable. I remember, usually, the way it works, yeah, I'm already losing my throat. Usually the way it works is you have specific, like, sub-areas there's large areas that are sectored off on the map, and there's sub-areas within those areas that contain charms or hidden charms, like the Joni's resting place or the Forgotten Crossroads area when you get one of the Firefly charm. You have to in the Crystal Mountain. You have to go through this whole section to get with lasers to get one of the deep focus. The Lifeblood section in the Abyss, etc., etc. There's usually a place where the charms are hidden behind a gauntlet of some type that are very atmospheric and these like really unique sub areas within the big areas. So that stuff's good, but there's also all kinds of these other like sub areas that are really just unique and interesting. I mean, I remember one is like in the very edge of Kingdom's Edge, there's a hidden crack in the wall. You go into it and you get to smash through the floor like 6 times and go deep, deep, deep underground, and where the scenery, the tile set actually transitions into the ancient basin tile set to indicate that you're really deep underground. And there's just this hidden giant geo deposit that respawns and gives you like 500 geo every time. And it's such a neat, it's such a cool little thing that's there, that's in the game. It's this nice, it's just some money, but it's this like a whole secret thing that you wouldn't even think about. And then you go there and you find it. It's like, it's cool. Oh, you actually found it. It's like the fact that you have secret things that are hidden this way is so good. My favorite example, and hidden rooms. And by the way, they find a way to make things interesting without necessarily giving, usually it's charms or geo, but it could be anything. Sometimes there's just an NPC that you can look at and talk to. Sometimes there's a dream character that you can dream nail. Sometimes there's a rotten egg. Sometimes there's some money. But again, it's like because there's so many different things that are an advantage. Sometimes it's a journal entry for like one of the unkillable enemies, right? Because there's so many things in the game that add to your progression and completion of it, they can hide almost anything, right? And sometimes it's none of those things. It's just the room itself is just there, and it's a hidden room, and it looks completely unique, and it's got like the friggin' Hallownest runes on the back of it or something, and you just have to sit there and wonder, why did they add this room to the game? What was the point of this? And it's interesting. You start to question yourself, what was the lore significance of this room? My favorite example of this was in Weaver's Den. There's a hidden room that's got nothing in it. It's just an empty hidden room with some runes on the back. And you have to, it's such a bizarre thing. You think maybe it has lore significance or what it does. And I've read like things on forums and people start speculating as to what this room's about. It'd be funny if they put it in just to troll you. But anyway, yeah, it's a hidden room that's behind a breakable wall that's inside another hidden room that's behind a breakable wall that's inside a hidden area called Weaver's Den that's accessible behind an invisible passage in the corner of a giant room in Deep Nest. Like, the point is, like, you can see how deep it goes. There's all these, like, just areas that are connected to the main map that have all these things in them. It's really fucking cool, is what I'm trying to say. Like, this game was made for me, is what I'm saying. It's completionism in and out. You can go as deep as you want. There's like layers and layers and layers of completion that you can get to. Not just going through the game and fighting the bosses, but the journal, the charms, everything. The friggin' ambient dialogue. Another good example of what I just meant, hidden room. In Grimm's tent, there's a hidden room that you can climb to at the top of the tent, where you have like these weird like mannequins in the background. It's just like, and it's just there. It's just there for you to look at and to speculate as to what the character is really trying to do and what the lore is about. It's really nice. So world building. So yeah, there's a lot of consistency in a lot of the things that you find in the game. Like the Seal of Hallownest, that's a symbol that you see virtually everywhere. There's runes inside the Black Egg that show up in various other places. There's statues of various characters, like the Hollow Knight statue in the middle of the City of Tears and stuff like that. So I'm having to drink too, because my throat's already clogging up. Yeah, there's so many nice visual indicators that repeat themselves that really help emphasize that they're, in an ambient sense that really help emphasize the worldliness of it, right? I mentioned the atmosphere. The game does a lot of work to try and really sell you that this is a world. You know, it's not just a kingdom that you can walk through and explore. It's actually a world. It feels very lived in. That's what a lot of the things like the Seal of Hallowness do. That's what a lot of symbols do. Symbols that repeat themselves and show up multiple times throughout the game. That's how you know that it's not just like, you know, if it's something that shows up just once and it's like a cool thing, it's like whatever. But the fact that they repeat themselves, you know, it starts justifying itself because then it's a pattern, which means it's actually adding to the world, right? And there's a lot of visual things that repeat themselves. And there's also a lot of visual things that you don't notice unless you already know what's going on in the game. A great example is the statue at the top of Crystal Peak, the statue of Radiance underneath the Paylor piece. That's a great example of it. That's where the Seer village must have been. You know, that's just one example, but the point is there's tons of these, right, of things that are there in the world that add to it. And of course there's dialogue. It's one thing you could complain about with Hollow Knight is that the story is really subtle to the point of like you don't even know what's happening some of the time. Like you probably won't be able to figure out what's going on in the world unless you read about it offline or look at lore pieces or have someone explain it to you, because yeah, like it's very subtle and very thick. And the thing is, the world is dense with lore. This is the Dark Souls thing all over again, because I know the Dark Souls does this. The world is dense with lore, but it's all presented in this like very... The game never tries to really give it to you. It's just there. Like if you talk to NPCs, they talk about things like they're, you know, like things that are happening to them, and they talk about the things that they're experiencing. But never at any point is anything in the game presented like it's trying to present you with the lore or with the story of the world. It's more like it's there. Everything is just a clue, and you have to figure it out. And that makes it challenging because you could go through the game and not experience or understand any of the lore whatsoever. Right? This is why I, again, emphasize that Hollow Knight is a game that you have to play as an experienced player, because you have to know what to look for or be willing to then explore and find out about the lore online, which is what mostly what I did. Okay. Sorry, I'm having to drink water because my throat's starting to hurt because I'm ranting. So, what we have... So, yeah, that's my point about lore. But the lore is really deep and really rich, and I'll get to, you know, most of it in detail later on. So then we have there's characterization, right? On top of, like I mentioned, with the way that the world is presented. There's ambience and atmosphere. There's consistency in the symbols that you see, which creates a sense of setting. And there's also lots of characterization. And it's really cool how there's characterization, even though there's no direct character. Basically what I mean is like there's no direct character in like a, you know, in a this is typically true of Metroidvanias. It was sort of true in Ori and the Blind Forest as well. Like there was no, like, what was Ori's character? Ori didn't have a character. She's just a, you know, just a gerbil thing, whatever. Actually, I mean, I guess the owl had some characterization in that game, but the point is there's no direct characterization. There's no direct character arc. There's more just indications of what might be a character if you looked at it more closely. There's just indications of what might be characterization, right? So, but a lot of it, a lot of how it's still presented is still something that it feels like a character, you know, it feels like it's something that could really be a character, right? There's still emotion in the way things are presented, even though it's a very simplified form. So, for example, like Hornet. Like, Hornet has all this, like, she's, like, very fierce and motivated and stuff like that. And you have, you know, you have Salubra, who's this, like, laughing, you know, crazy gypsy woman. And then you have Zote, who's just, like, this pathetic, deluded fool. And Quarrel and one of the swordsmen that walks through the whole area with you, and Tiso, this arrogant fighting guy. The point is there's characterization there in the sense that, like, they feel like they could be characters, right? You don't really know them directly. Nothing is direct in this game, but they feel like they could be characters. And that's the thing that's what's really cool about it. So the fact is that's there. It's also really good how they managed to get the characterization across without even having English. Because all the bugs speak some kind of foreign dialect language thing, and yet they're still able to express emotion. Yeah, what's his name? Dung Defender, and he's all this jolly, like, dung beetle guy. It's cool how they're able to express emotion without necessarily having anything to directly, you know, give it to you. So that's good. So yeah, it also, I would say it fits again, everything in this game fits with everything else, but it fits the style of the game perfectly because you can't have a direct characterization in this type of game. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work with the way the story works because the story is meant to be very subtle and almost kind of not the point of it, you know? And at the same time, the direct characterization would also take away from things because the game's very cartoony a lot of times. It's very, like, not serious. It's got the whole, like, it's a cartoon. It's kind of a joke a lot of the times. It doesn't always take itself seriously. You know, you have these silly little bugs that are going around doing their silly little thing. It's fine if you don't have direct characterization with that. It's still, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say with characterization is that there's enough of it that it feels present without it feeling like it's really trying to give you like the journeys of these characters, which is good because it's not really about the journeys or experiences of these characters. And that brings me to a weird question about the knight himself, because what kind of character is the knight? I actually don't want to call him the knight. I want to call him the child knight because he's like the Hollow Knight is an adult and he's a child, which, by the way, why is that the case? Why is the Hollow Knight an adult and you're a child? Like, I never actually understood that. Like, why did the Hollow Knight age? Or rather, why are you still a child? It's like you're created very recently, whereas the Hollow Knight was not. It's bizarre. I guess what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I want to call him the child knight. You're not a character in the direct sense because you don't ever you never show any real interest in trying to do anything or accomplish things. You just do sort of what people tell you. And that makes a certain degree of sense because if you think about it, the child knight was created to be a tool, right? A spoiler alert to the story, because I mean, I'm going to get into it in the specifics later, but you're created as a tool. So obviously you don't have your own ambitions or anything. You just kind of walk around aimlessly and just sort of do the things people ask you to do. You know, you talk to the guy in Dirtmouth and he's like, oh, people have gone down the well and never returned. And what do? Well, you go down the well. What else are you going to do? You're just sort of there to just do whatever. And doing whatever also means pursuing everything and, you know, completing the entire world, I guess, and finding every little thing. There's no real... You're not driven by any sort of direct goal, and that also, in some weird way, explains why you end up just doing all the shit that's there. I don't know, this is my own kind of headcanon-y way of explaining why the Child Knight just kind of does everything that's there to do, is because he has no reason not to, because he doesn't have any focus, I guess. That's one way to think about it. Not sure if that makes perfect sense, but that's there. Also, as far as characterization, a lot of the characterization happens in Dirtmouth, which is cool because it's like Dirtmouth is this like sad little town that slowly comes more to life as the game progresses. You free Sly, you know, you open up the map shop and the stag station, and Greta shows up, and the whole place just kind of livens up a little. And it has this element of like a little bit of hope to it, like almost like you're rebuilding civilization a little after Hallownest has fallen. That's one of the things that Hollow Knight sort of introduces, that there is this slight urge of life sort of regrowing after having been pretty much demolished by, well, everything that happened with the Radiance and the fall of Hollow Knight. So that part there is really good. I guess it's just there a little bit subtly. It's not a direct goal. The direct goal is to just explore and learn the history of Hallownest. That's the direct goal, if anything. rebuilding things is not the direct goal. But it would be a nice concept for a game itself if it existed. So, what else? Yeah, so I mean, I already mentioned like the different hidden areas, and there's a fast travel system. That's another thing. It's like one of the things that adds to completionism is fast travel. I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess I've already talked a lot about like how the exploration is supposed to work and how the exploration adds to things. One of the things I wanted to mention was the grubs. I find it funny and kind of depressing why this game wants to hurt cute things. Like you have these grubs and you spend all day collecting them and then the dude just eats them. It's like, why does he eat them? You know, I wanted them to be safe. That's why I rescued them. They were stuck in cages and he just eats them. The fucking grub father, the asshole. Fuck that guy. It's also there with the maggots. The maggots are enemies that have invaded the false knight. He's one of like the 5 knights of Hallownest, and they took his armor. And it's so sad because when you go into that area to do the dream fight, they're just having like a funeral for their fallen brother, and you have to murder them to get the journal entry. It's so sad. I did it to get the journal entry, obviously, but it's just so sad. I feel so bad for these poor things. Oh, another great aspect of storytelling. They found so many ways of giving you information about what was happening without really forcing it, not only without forcing it down your throat, but without making it even feel present. Like I said, you can walk through the game and explore everything and learn nothing. But you have to do certain things to learn about it, and you have to use your brain and really think about things. It's a style of storytelling where the story is there, like if you want it to be. You have to choose. You have to choose for it to be. You have to really dig and look for it. And it's almost like non-storytelling. It's almost like telling a story without telling it. It's almost like there's a story, you know, and it's available, but you get to choose whether it gets told. One of the ways that this happens was with dream nailing, because you can dream nail virtually everything in the game, but you have to actually choose to do it. And there's so many details about things that are hidden in just the dream nail sequences and dream nailing NPCs and enemies and just the random bodies you see all over the place. I noticed, for example, in the green path, if you dream nail bodies, they'll say things like lost, tired, lost, hungry, and it's so sad because what it means is these people were looking for Hallownest. They walked into the green path and they got lost in Un's world and starved to death or lost their way. It's really kind of twisted when you think about it. That's another thing, is like this game manages to be very dark, like things like that. Like it manages to be very dark and very twisted in a lot of places, but also kind of happy in some places. Like it's twisted and dark, but it's not unhappy. It's not miserable. Because like I said, there's still comic relief with like the grub father and the maggots. There's still things where it doesn't take itself seriously. There's just like the weird animations on the characters, on the Grey Mourner, when you like break the flower and you bring it back to the broken flower to him, on Dung Defender and stuff like that. There's all this like humor, and Zote, obviously. There's all this humor to it as well as all this reality at the same time. It's a perfect balance. It works because the cartoony nature of everything allows for you to have this kind of non-serious way of just presenting things and having humor and having ridiculousness, but you know, there's all this subtlety to it as well. Like the fact of the matter is, like all the stuff that's serious is so subtle that neither the serious stuff nor the humorous stuff is interfering with neither of these things is interfering with the other, right? Which is why it works, right? The problem, I just friggin' reviewed Ruby, and the problem with Ruby, and the problem with what certain shows do, is that they try to present you with both of those things and they try to shove them down your throat, like at the same time. you know, and it's like there's a scene and this is supposed to be serious, and then there's a scene and this is supposed to be funny, and it's like they do it in a way where one thing takes away from the other, right? But by Hollow Knight manages to make both of them work because, well, basically they both neither of them interfere with the other. They both stay right out of each other's way, and it just works splendidly. So that part's great. I guess, yeah, the other thing is, like, I guess the other thing I could talk about is the regions. The regions are all really cool. There's so many regions in this game, right? I kept being surprised. Like, you look at other Metroid games or Metroidvanias, it's like there's like maybe 5, 6 regions. There's like 10, 12 regions in Hollow Knight. Actually, I'm not going to count them, but there's a lot. It's a very big map. It takes a long time to explore everything. That's part of the reason why the game takes so long. This is the difficulty, but it's the size of the map. It's the size of the exploration. It's very all of the regions have their own little characteristics to them. All of them have all of them have their own themes. And what I love is sort of the connections between them as well. They're consistent with one another. For example, on the left end of the City of Tears, where it's touching the fungal growth, you see this wall of like mushrooms and stuff, and you see where it's creeping into the city. And the same thing on the right end, where you have the Kingdom's Edge, you see the giant wall of the City of Tears just end, and like the sewer system like spilling itself out right there. The different regions are connected in ways that makes a lot of sense. I also mentioned this back with like the giant geodeposit. Like there's the large tunnel, and then the tile set changes and you enter the ancient basin. The regions fit together very well. It's also really cool how all of them are underground. So that literally what's happening as you're going through the game is you're actually going lower. This is an interesting point because I found it's like, if you look at Ori and the Blind Forest, for example, the game is 2D in that you're always going up and down, but in terms of how in terms of where you are in the world, you're not actually going up and down. Right? Like, for example, in Ori and the Blind Forest, you start out on a screen where you see the giant tree that's in the middle of the forest in the background. But in the game, if you then try to navigate up towards, like, the middle of the map, which is vertical, you end up right in front of that tree. So you're going up and down, but you're also going front and back, or left and right. Sorry, you're going up and down in game, but you're traveling through the Z direction in the actual world. Here, you're actually traveling through the Z direction. I was confused about this, but they do mean that. That's also why you have like the blue lake above the City of Tears. That's also explaining why the City of Tears is literally raining on top of that. So everything here literally is vertical. I found it so hard to explain initially because when I first played the game, because I'm like, how is there a giant city underground? Right? But the reason and how is it raining? Well, it's like the reason is because there's a lake above it, and you know, and it's literally built right in this giant cave right underneath the lake, and that's why it's raining, right? And I guess it's strange still though, because like even though everything's underground, nothing's really that dark except for like Deep Nest. Most places feel very bright, like they just feel kind of like, you know, they feel kind of like open air, like the Green Path. By the way, why is there a giant forest underground? You know, it doesn't necessarily make sense. We don't know where the light's coming from. You know, it doesn't always feel like you're underground, but realistically, everything that's happening is subterranean. Still, my point is, I really like the feel of all the different regions, and I feel like, as well with the visual style of it, they managed to hit. This is what I like about completionism, right? There's a lot of different visual themes they managed to hit. And without making them interfere with one another, that all fit the same overarching pattern, right? You got the Forgotten Crossroads. You know, it's this region full of like passageways, and there's pulleys, and you know, clearly life was teeming with life in the past, probably because it's close to the mines and it's close to the City of Tears. And you got the City of Tears, which is this cityscape, and you have the Kingdom's Edge, which is like the remnants on the outside of the kingdom. You have all these places that fit very well with one another. Like, they make sense that they're together in this way, right? It would make sense that you have a giant city, and then the sewers underneath the city, and like the highways and the Forgotten Crossroads near the city and stuff like that. You know, or Green Path next to Fog Canyon, next to City of Tears, next to Fungus. It's like, and all the like the stuff that's alive is also close to together, and all the stuff, all the regions that are kind of dead and lifeless are all very far away, or they're deep down underground. And again, all of it, so they're all like connected in a sensical way, and they used they used a lot of different. Obviously, they didn't touch every different possible visual theme that they could have. We're going to see more of that in Silksong, but they hit on a lot of them, which is really nice. Like cities, ruins, forests, everything is there. And that brings me to a question, which I guess is like, what is your favorite area in Hollow Knight? I'd say this is one of those things that's just subjective. I like the idea that people have different answers for this, depending on what particular region they like the most. I think my favorite region, so my favorite region, and I'm going to bring this, I'm going to actually talk about this. Yeah, I'll talk about this now. Every single area has a theme. Every single area has a theme song. Actually, hold on, let me check this. I'm not sure if the area I'm talking about has a theme song. I will check this right now. But yeah, no, most regions have a song. Crystal Peak has a really nice song to it. Yeah, this area doesn't have a song. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is there was a region in the game that I liked most. Most of the areas have a theme, visual, and they have a song, and they have a really nice color choice. But then what happens is eventually, when you go deep enough underground, underneath the City of Tears, it's really cool the way it transitions into the ancient basin. Basically, the visuals, the colors fade away. Everything becomes really gray. You start seeing these dark particles floating around in the air, which are void particles, obviously. And then you get deeper in, and everything's just kind of gray and lifeless. And of course, there's no music playing. It's totally silent. And the enemies there are really different. They're really weird. And the first time I found the ancient basin, I was really like off-put by it. It's like, wow, what is this place? It's like, you know, you're entering a place that's different than any of the other places in the game. It also took me a long time to actually discover the ancient basin. It's just got this very eerie stillness to it. This static, like, lifelessness to it. And even though there's living things there, they're very weird. You know, these just like slug things that crawl around. They're very lifeless themselves. They don't, you know, they're not really active. They don't do much. You know, the whole place is just, you know, it's just got this like stagnancy to it, which fits perfectly with what we know is down there, right, in the abyss. It's a really nice way of visually presenting things, right? When you're stuck throughout the whole game and everything's teeming with activity and life, you got the fungal growths, you got the green path, you got all these places. You finally get down to the ancient basin, and it's just nothing. You even got like Deep Nest. Deep Nest also doesn't have music, but Deep Nest has this eerie, jittery fucking noise to it because there's shit crawling around everywhere. There's nothing down in the ancient basin. It's just void, like stillness and the infection. And that's really cool because that's also where the biggest chunks of the story happen, as far as, you know, what you learn about, well, the Pale King and the Void and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm getting to, so I guess I can talk about like the story more directly now. I mentioned that there's no obvious storytelling style, and the whole way everything's presented is it's presented in a very indirect. Everything's indirect. The story is just, it's just an experience with, like, you know, the story's an optional objective. So what we know about Hallownest. Hallownest is the name of the kingdom, although the places we go to throughout the world aren't technically part of it. Hallownest completely. Like, we go to Deepnest, which isn't technically part of Hallownest. We go to Kingdom's Edge, which is technically outside of Hallownest. We go to the Howling Cliffs, which is technically right at the edge of Hallownest, and so on and so, and the Un's domain, which is also not part of Hallownest. So Hallownest is basically the Pale King's domain, right? He was this worm, or a, we don't know what he was. He was some kind of like dragon worm thing, WYRM, whatever. And he started this kingdom. And there was a previous kingdom. There were other kingdoms that existed before him. There were the Seers, that were moths that worshipped the Radiance, and then Pale King took over and he created this civilization of bugs, basically. He allied himself with the White Lady, you know, and they had a bunch of children, and yeah, we know what happened there. But basically, you are going through the game after Hallownest has fallen, and what's still there is all the stuff that's left. You have the mantises they have their own little tribe in the fungal growths, and some of them went off into the Queen's Gardens. You've got the people in Kingdom's Edge that are running an arena somehow, so there's still some bugs that are there's still some bugs that are around, that are alive. It's clear that, like, I guess most of the bugs that are there, the whole arena thing feels like it's very, like, gladiatorial. It feels like a bunch, like it's something that a warlord is in charge of, like some sort of barbaric entertainment thing, which makes sense, I guess, because it makes sense because, you know, it's like the fall of Rome. What happens when Rome fell is you had a whole bunch of barbarian tribes that just took over. So that's sort of how the world works, is you don't have a lot of civilization. You don't have a lot of kingdoms or you don't have any real kingdoms or countries or real government. You just have some small little, you know, tribes here and there. The mantises, you got the warlords who have their own little arena running. You got the friggin', you know, you got the people in Dirtmouth who just don't want to do their own thing. Everyone's kind of like separated and nothing's really organized. That's the general way of the world. It's very much like Rome has fallen, everything is in disarray. The one kingdom that's left is Deepnest, and I'm actually concerned whether Deepnest is like, I'm questioning to what extent, because I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to have an alliance, Deepnest and Hallownest, because they were building a tram in between them, and then the Pale King did have like he did have a relationship with one of the Deepnest people, one of the Dreamers. So, but it's clear Deepnest is not friendly to other bugs, and it's pretty clear that Deepnest is not friendly to you. And it's also questionable whether Deepnest isn't infected at this point. Like, most of the enemies in Deepnest, they do have the yellow eyes that all the other infected enemies do, so I'm not sure whether Deepnest is still, like, what Deepnest would have been back when, you know, the Pale King was in charge. You can speculate about Deepnest, but I feel like Deepnest at this point is probably messed up and infected just like everything else. So yeah, there's that. We have the 5 warriors, most of whom are dead. The only one who's alive is the Dung Defender. By the way, more amazing visual storytelling when you finally find out where he sleeps and you see him in the little dung statues he made of all his friends. It's one of those and other things. It's like, it's so sad. It's so sad. It's like he's all alone, living here in his like dung hole. All of his friends left him, and they're all dead, you know, anyway. Poor guy. You have the Grey Mourner, who disappears after you give him the white flower. You have Isma, who's dead. You have the big dude, who's the False Knight, who's dead. And you have the one who's defending the White Lady, who's dead. So most of them are dead. It's one of the things, it's like you learn about the 5 warriors, and you learn about the people who were the big players of Hallownest and more of how they died, and the relationships between them. Some of the stuff is like, again, there's so many little things. Like you see, I just remember when you go from the Mantis village over to Deepnest, the connection is you see like a pile of corpses of various Deepnest bugs. So it's clear that the Mantises stopped like the Deepnest bugs trying to burrow into their territory. So there's so many little things like that. Oh god, there's so much I love it. Visual storytelling. You got oh man, the Soul Master. So a lot of what you learn about throughout the setting is about what exactly happened to the fall of Hallownest. Essentially, what's going on is you have this crazy powerful force called the Infection that was destroying everything, or converting everyone to a zombie. And various people in Hallownest thought of ways to try and deal with it. One of them was the Soul Master, and what he did was really fucked up. And they all were... you go to the Soul Sanctum, you see what happened to all the bugs that try to follow his way. Granted, what the Pale King did was also kind of fucked up, but it actually sort of worked, I guess. Well, this is the thing. It's like we discover what actually happened. Most of the narrative progression comes into learning what happened. We find out about Hallownest and the Pale King very early on. We find out about the Soul Master reasonably early on, and then the rest of the game is just expanding on the details. Why the Soul Master's method didn't work in harnessing soul, and why the while the Pale King's method did work, more or less, right? There's not much progression that leads us to learning about that stuff, other than like things that we learned from the Seer, things that we learned from the Hornet and the White Lady, right? Who are all the only characters in the story that basically try to lead the Child Knight along. Like the Hornet, the White Lady, and the Seer are the only ones who are, if anything, aware of what the main conflict of Hallownest is. Nobody else seems to know what's going on. Or the other people who know what's going on don't seem to care. So yeah, we learn about the Dreamers, which, by the way, I find the Dreamers to be a very cool concept. I like the idea of having to like find these targets that aren't actually bosses. There's bosses, you have to fight bosses to get to them, but you don't actually have to fight them because they're not bosses. They're just these kind of like limp, they're just kind of these limp beings that aren't trying to do anything, except their very existence is meant to seal the Radiance away, but and you just have to eliminate them to open up the egg and kill it. What else do we have? Oh, we have the dream world. So I like the idea of the dream world. I like the idea of the dream world because it fits into the whole. Well, first of all, it fits into the whole like very memory-driven theme of Hollow Knight and remembering and finding out like what happened with Hallownest and reliving all those memories and moving on from those memories. And the dream world ties into that because the dream world is essentially an embodiment of everyone's memories and dreams. It's not clear whether the dream world is dreams or memories, but I'm pretty sure it's essentially like memories. That's the way I tend to think about it. It's like it's directly related to people's memories. It's also pretty clear that, so this again, a lot of this stuff is me trying to infer because it's not obvious. The dream world is something that always exists. It's something that exists with all consciousnesses, like it's a collective thing, because you get to you are pulled out of the dream world. You are thrown into the dream world by the dreamers when they find you, when they sense your presence in the real world, and you are taken out of the dream world by the Seer when she senses your presence in the dream world. So it's clear that the dream world is something different. All these different people get to interact with. It's also pretty clear that that's the case, considering that different beings show up in different people's dreams. You, for one, show up in lots of people's dreams, and that's because you have the dream nail. And who made the dream nail? I imagine it would have been the moths and the seers that created it. And then the last seer gives it to you because I guess she assumes that you're the only thing left in the setting that could deal with the problem that's in the dream world, which is the Radiance. Yeah, so I mean, the dream world is a very nice way of elevating, I guess, the general like thematic purpose of the story, and it's a good way of storytelling the fact that you're learning about the memories of this whole place. It also elevates the memories as something. It's like it gets this whole memories are real type of thing. Like memory is a real place in this setting. And it emphasizes that several times because you actually change things in the real world based on how you change things in the dream world, right? There are various, especially with some of the endings, what ends up happening to characters in the real world comes from what happens to them in the dream world, right? Sometimes you can only let a certain spirit move on after having defeated it is by defeating it in the dream world. This happens several times with like different soul bosses, like the failed champion and stuff. And yeah, and like with the void itself, you find out that the physical world is affected by the dream world, and the dream world is affected by the physical world. So there's a weird like interplay and connection between them. Yeah, I just thought I'd point that out, I guess. There's also like different things show up differently in the dream world at different times. The void is different in the dream world depending on which version of the Radiance you're fighting, and the seer is yeah, like things in the dream world can shift and change depending, I guess, on who's affecting it. So that sort of adds to the whole. This thing is a very some kind of collective memory dimension thing, which is cool. It also puts in question as to why the dreamers put you in the dream world, and I guess the reason that they put you in the dream world is because they perceive that what you're trying to do is you're trying to open up the black egg and let the radiance out. It's really confusing as to how, like, the story, the logic of the story with the purpose of the black egg and what it's there for, because the dreamers find you right at the beginning of the game and they put you into the dream world. They try to seal you up in the dream world when you find the resting grounds, which is really probably the main section of the game where the story really progresses when you finally meet the seer. They throw you into the dream world because it's bizarre. Like, okay, this is the thing. It's like all the dreamers have their own characterizations because they all have their own interpretations of what the Pale King wanted. Hera and the Watcher, I forget the Watcher's name, but the two of them, they want. As far as I understand, they assume or they think that you're trying to destroy the black egg or open up, because so what ends up happening, right, is as you defeat the dreamers, more infection is released from the black egg. Part of the reason the dreamers are there is to seal the black egg to make the infection less powerful, to seal it away, right? So defeating them actually makes things infected and makes things worse. So what you're trying to do is you're trying, so they perceive that as a threat because you're trying to open, you're learning about them, you're trying to find out about how they seal the black egg and presumably go in there and release it, right? It's weird because you have to question whether or not the dreamers know that you're also a vessel, and whether or not they know that you could actually replace the Hollow Knight, who has a cracked shell at this point, and he's not really working that well anymore as a vessel. This is the whole point of the conflict of the story. What happens at the beginning, right, is the Hollow Knight's shell cracks, and the Radiance infection starts spreading again, you know, wildly. So it's weird why the dreamers try to stop you. It's possible they don't realize this is happening, but they would realize this is happening because they're living in the dream world, right? And they would notice the Radiance being in the dream world because it's a collective thing, right? So it's debatable whether or not things really make sense. You know, I was wondering this, like, going through the game multiple times, whether or not the things in the game actually fundamentally work. Why do the dreamers try to stop you? And the other thing, it's weird because the teacher, Monoman the teacher, doesn't try to stop you. Monoman the teacher lures you and Coral into her lair so that you can kill her and get rid of her seal so that you could then replace the Hollow Knight, right? Monoman the teacher's whole purpose is she understands that that vessel is messed up and broken and that something needs to be done, otherwise the infection is going to continue to spread. Right, so their purpose is their purpose as a their function as the seals of the Hollow Knight of the vessel and the Radiance are failing, and something else will need to be done. It's possible Monoman realizes this because Monoman's just smarter, and the other two were just like Pale King fanboys, and you know, Hera and the Watcher, they were just basically acolytes of the Pale King and doing whatever the Pale King said. And since the Pale King told them to seal the Radiance away, this here, you know, the Child Knight comes in here and is like, has access to the dream world and is a vessel and could get rid and could open up the seals. They're like, no, this is a threat. We need to get rid of this because the seals need to stay locked, so the Radiance needs to stay in there. but I guess it didn't make sense, is what I'm saying. So I am curious as to what the real thought process there was with the dreamers. This gets me into other weird questions. Like, the timeline is a little wonky with what actually happened, because what happened was the Pale King took over. So the Radiants had a tribe of moths. The Pale King came in, and whoever people were worshipping before that, they stopped worshipping them. They started worshipping the Pale King. The Radiance was really upset about this. She took it to heart. She was really mad. She was really upset, and she started raging. And her rage turned into the infection. And the infection started to infect everything and basically destroy everything. And everybody was trying to look for a way to stop it. The Soul Master, the Pale King, and he was experimenting with Void in order to do it. And the whole idea is that he invented the vessels for Void, and thought that the way to contain the Radiance is to use Void, because the Radiance's power comes from light, the Void's power comes from darkness. With enough darkness, you can contain the light, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. What's wonky is that at some point or another, they succeeded. They built the perfect vessel, the Hollow Knight, and they sealed the Radiance inside it, and they sealed it in the Black Egg, and then they sealed it with the... They sealed it in the Black Egg, and then they sealed the Black Egg with the 3 Dreamers, and then they locked the Dreamers behind this magical shield so you couldn't actually hurt the Dreamers, and then they put all the Dreamers in different places in Hallownest, and that was basically it. And you couldn't get to these Dreamers without using the only way to get to them was to use the Dream Nail, right? And then the Pale King vanished. And then some arbitrary amount of time passed, and then the game actually starts. And this is why I also question why the knight is a child, is because how much time passes in between this period? Because if you pay attention to, like, it's presented in a way that's strange. When you first come to Dirtmouth, it's clear that the infection is having an effect. You find Sly down in the Forgotten Crossroads somewhere, and he's got the little infection like haze above his head, and then you free him from that. He snaps out of it, and then he comes back and opens his shop. So it's clear the infection's having an effect on people right now, and you're trying to stop that. A lot of what you're doing. You also don't notice how relevant the infection is until you really find out what it is. Most of the enemies you fight in the game are enemies because they're infected. Right? They either have infection on them or their eyes are infected, and you can tell that their eyes are totally yellow. But they got, or orange. They got like the orange glow. And that's the case with literally every enemy in the City of Tears. Every enemy in the City of Tears is infected. So then the question is, you know, if all of the enemies are, if the Radiance was sealed, how are all the people infected, basically, right? If the Radiance was sealed away and it was a success, and it was a success because at the time, right, they built the statue of the Hollow Knight and said, and the Dreamers, and looked like, hey, look, we sealed the Radiance away and now Hallownest stands eternal. But it didn't work, right, considering that everyone's infected anyway. It's possible that what happened was people still slowly became infected over time, or what happens is when the Radiance was sealed away, the infection stopped spreading, but it didn't actually disappear. So people like the zombies in the City of Tears continue to stay infected, and they just killed all of the non-zombies and basically, you know, annihilated them, killed them. And now the City of Tears, and then they just remained infected forever because the infection doesn't go away. And this would actually be consistent with certain things in the game. Like, it's possible that people who get infected enough just stay infected. You can't free them anymore. It never goes away. At that point, it's like an actual physiological, effect where it takes over your mind and you stop being who you are. And of course, this makes sense because you go down in the ancient basin and the infection's still down there. And that infection is old. That's not being caused by the Radiance who's now living up in the Black Egg. This is something else, right? This is the old infection that was there from the very beginning. That is why the Pale King was experimenting. So it's bizarre with how exactly, like, we don't know how exactly the infection works. But it's kind of weird. I always found it strange that there was a statue of the Hollow Knight in the middle of the City of Tears, which claimed that the Hollow Knight actually worked, that they sealed the Radiance away, and now Hallownest stands eternal. But it didn't work because clearly Hallownest is messed up, and while the Dreamers and the Hollow Knight are still alive and totally fine, the rest of Hallownest is a mess, and the Pale King is gone, right? It's also bizarre with the amount of time that's passed, because if you look at the City of Tears doesn't look like it's that old, right? It doesn't even look like it's that decayed or decrepit. Like, the City of Tears looks pretty much fine. Like, some of the furniture is busted up. But I feel like you could, you know, if you dealt with the zombies, you just repair some of the furniture and it would be a perfectly functioning city all over again. So I guess it's... Whereas the Forgotten Crossroads and, you know, places like the Ancient Basin, they really look old. They look like they've been, you know, just sitting there for like years, for decades, hundreds of years even. So it's weird. But also, we don't know how old some of these bugs are, how much time passes, because obviously... This is where things start getting really weird, because we see the Hollow Knight before the Radiance was put into him. We see him when he was a child, and then obviously he's an adult in the Black Egg, and his statue is that of an adult, which means he must have grown up in the Black Egg with the Radiance inside him, or maybe he didn't become a vessel until he was an adult. It's really friggin' complicated, because we meet him when he's a child, and we know that he's already been selected as the intended vessel for the Radiance. So at what point does the Radiance actually get put inside of him? Also, again, this gets into the question as to why exactly is the Child Knight still a child, whilst the Hollow Knight is an adult? And the Hornet. The Hornet is the child of the Pale King and Hera, the Dreamer, right? We find out about this through Hera's lore. So why exactly... So how much time has really passed since these Dreamers were sealed away? It's possible not that much time has passed, considering that their next generation of kin are still around, and the Child Knight's somehow still a child. And the Hornet, she's not that old, right? I mean, she's obviously older than the Child Knight, but she's not that old. And then, of course, the Hollow Knight himself is somehow not... It's very wonky. You get the idea that it's wonky. It's not clear that there's actually a correct answer to some of these things. It's possible that there isn't, because if the Hollow Knight... Like, okay, spoiler alert. The Hollow Knight is your brother, and the Hornet is your half-sister, right? So, if you're all siblings, and you're all the last generation progeny of the people who ran Hallownest who are gone, how exactly are all of you... First of all, how exactly do all of you have a different age? And how exactly has Hallownest been like, messed up and fucked for, like, years and years at this point, because it's meant to be this old kingdom, even though really it seems like everything that happened would have happened quite recently, considering, you know, that you're just the next generation progeny, right? It's not like you're arriving. It's weird because the way it's presented at the beginning is you feel like Hallownest is a very old kingdom, but it's not. It's like it's just fell apart, and you're just there to see what's happening as it fell apart. Like, the wound is still fresh as the kingdom's bleeding out. So you have that. I mean, I guess that's the thing. That's the shit that's bizarre. So I talked about the infection, yeah. So the threat of the infection feels recent. That thing can be explained from the fact that the infection is now spreading again because of the crack on that Hollow Knight's mask, which is clearly what's being intended there. And it's also clear that the Black Egg doesn't really fix it. It can seep out of the Black Egg because the Black Egg is sealed, and yet Sly is getting infected, and there's people in the Forgotten Crossroads that are getting infected, right? So it's clear that it's still having an effect. This gets into the real freaking question as to what extent were things infected before the Radiance was sealed away. And if there was a large period of time between when the Radiance was first sealed and the present day when when the game starts, was the infection still spreading during this period of time? Because there's so many infected enemies throughout the game, like the Green Path, right? The mantises that are in the Queen's Gardens. Deep Nest, everyone, virtually everything is infected. Did this just start when the mask cracked? The other thing is, I guess we don't know when the mask cracked, right? It might not have cracked the day that the Hollow Knight, the Child Knight shows up in Dirtmouth, but it might have cracked like within the last year or so, and that's why the infection's spreading again, and that's why there's so much infection going around. Or it could be that all of this was infected the first time and it's all just still around. You have all of these questions. It's not necessarily like, again, I am willing to entertain it. It's not necessarily logical. It's not necessarily that it was designed to be logical. But yeah, so you have that. Now, so I'm getting into like the big discussionary aspects of the story here with the light and the void. It's clear that the Radiance's power comes from the light, but the Radiance herself does not equal the light. It's a weird... okay, there's weird speculation as to what exactly the nature of the void and the light is. The game is very subtle about this stuff, and one of the problems with subtlety is you don't have direct answers. And it's more, sorry, it's more than that. It's like, you don't have direct answers. There might not even be direct answers that are intended and written into the story. Some of the things are direct answers. Like, we know that the Hollow Knight is your brother and that the Hornet is your half-sister. We don't necessarily know what the nature of the void and light are, and the soul. My understanding of it is that soul is like this general life force energy that exists in all things. That's why you get soul whenever you hit an enemy, and why you don't get soul when you hit an inanimate object, or void, right? And soul is just a general thing that has like power and energy that exists within all life forms. Void doesn't have it because void is not alive in the same way. So that's what soul is. So soul is not, but soul is not the opposite of void. Soul is just everything. You know, it's all the stuff that's alive has soul, and void is a particular kind of thing that's just not alive. The Radiance herself, she's not the opposite of void. She's just a being, a god that uses soul power with a lot of strength and a lot of energy and a lot of, well, a lot of fire and stuff, right? So I don't have a clear sense of like good or light versus darkness in the setting. It doesn't feel like light and dark or soul and void are both direct things that are in opposition. It feels like soul is just this thing that's everything that's contained in all life. And you have the Radiance, who's this powerful being that's borrowing all this soul energy. And the void is just this entity that doesn't follow those rules at all, and it doesn't. It's alive, but it's not like soul at all. And most of the things in the world operate off of soul energy, and soul energy can obviously be abused. You have the Soul Master who abuses them, and obviously you have the Radiance who abuses them. And it's pretty clear that, yeah, the way soul can be used is there's like, the natural way that soul manifests in living things is fine, but then there's all of these twisted-ass things that you can do with it, where you can create this, like, I forget what the enemies are called, but, like, the soul, the malformations, like, the bugs that have, like, that are just, like, floating weird, disfigured, like, masses in the Soul Sanctum. Those are the experiments and the foibles that happen where we experimented with soul and we did some fucked up shit. And obviously the Radiance with her soul power literally creates some kind of like physiological, like infectious plague that just kills everything, takes over everything, and turns things into zombies. So yeah, that's messed up. Oh, yeah, the other reason, sorry, I just looking through my notes, I just remembered another thing. One of the other reasons I thought that the timeline was wonky is that the White Lady, there are like signs of a battle right outside the White Lady's area where she lives. There's signs of a struggle right out there, and you see the corpses of one of the 5 warriors right there. So it's clear that someone tried to destroy the White Lady, and they failed. And the White Lady doesn't even, the White Lady never mentions this. She doesn't even seem to know about it. But the whole point is, like, the whole thing feels very recent, like it just happened, you know? And So that's the whole thing. It's like if a lot of like, again, if the fall of Hallownest, it's possible that it was recent, that the White Lady is just, again, she's her own like little part of the kingdom, and when the Mantis Lords, you know, when the Mantises split off and all the crazy Mantises who became infected as well went after the White Lady and her people, they ended up killing most of them and almost killing her, I guess. It's hard to, we don't know, it's weird. But it's just another one of those things that makes it feel like the conflict of all the stuff that happened before the fall of Hallownest happened recently, and here you are. So it's not like it happened that long ago. And again, it's another one of those things where the Radiance is driving the conflict, even though the Radiance is sealed away. If there's any real problem with the story of Hallownest, is that the Radiance is simultaneously responsible for everything that's wrong in the world, whilst also having been locked away for God knows how long by the Hollow Knight, when supposedly it shouldn't have been having an effect. And we know that what the Hollow Knight did when they locked the Radiance away did have at least somewhat of an effect, because the bugs thought it was a success, right? They literally put up a statue. Like, they had time to build a statue of the Hollow Knight and be like, yeah, we won, it works. The Radiance is locked, cha-ching, everybody wins, right? And there are people who still, the White Lady, for example, actually thinks it would be a success if you replaced the Hollow Knight. So it's a question of whether it makes sense, or it's a question of whether or not the bugs were so naive that they actually thought that when they locked the Radiance away, that the problem was fixed. And so they celebrated too early, even though the infection didn't really go away, and their civilization still fell, and fucking barbarians took over, and the Pale King left, so everything still fell apart, and the Radiance didn't even really go away. So yeah. Yeah, sorry, that was just a tangent I need to go on. So I guess now, let's talk about the Void. The Void is an interesting concept. Like I mentioned, the Pale King, sorry, the Ancient Basin was my favorite area. The Abyss was the coolest section of the game. I love going down into the Abyss, exploring it, and that whole area. It felt so creepy and so dangerous, and so it just felt like you were in the presence of something like ultra powerful and evil and magnificent at the same time. It felt like some very great like things and deeds took place down in the Abyss, in that area, with the things that live down there. It's a very powerful sequence, and it's also one of those things where you get the sense that what you're dealing with is not good, but it's the thing that's necessary to stop the problem at hand, which is the Radiance taking over everything with the infection. Like I said, the Abyss is terrifying, and the Void is not presented as if it's a good thing. In some sense, they even present like what the Pale King was doing by experimenting with Void was as dangerous as what Soul Master was doing by experimenting with Soul, because the Void is not a good thing, and it's not presented like it's a good thing. It's just presented as the only thing that can stop the Radiance because of how out of control she is. But the Void is not like a good thing, and it's presented with this mystery. The whole thing is really, has tons of this like atmosphere. It's not the kind of evil that's mwahaha, I'm going to destroy things. It's not trying to destroy things. It's not trying to preserve things. It's not trying to build anything. It's not trying to manipulate. It's just this like force of nature that's foul. That's the sense. That's the harsh sense that it has. That I feel that it has. It's just wrong. You know, it's foul. It's not good. You feel like it's a bad thing. Like you feel like it's this thing that's just. It's this thing that just isn't good because it's not alive and it doesn't care, and it has this just character of, like, you see those thrashing tendrils. It has this foul alien character that you can't quite describe. That's kind of just like, and its purpose is inscrutable, and its functionality is indecipherable. But it has the air and the character of the indescribable evil, and the indescribable still evil. That's how I can talk about. That's how I can describe the void. It's got a stillness to it. It's like still, eerie, off. Yeah, those are the words that apply. And that's the whole feeling that you get when you walk into the ancient basin with all the particles and the lack of music and everything. It's just this stagnant and still and eerie and just wrong. And something foul is going on down there, and you don't quite know what. And the void is the problem. And of course, with the Godmaster ending, this brings up what I mentioned about how the void behaves in different endings. The void is not a good thing. Like, especially with the Godmaster DLC, is it really doesn't... Like, I actually know... I felt bad for the Radiance when I eventually killed it, because, you know, especially in the Godmaster DLC, which is really hard, by the way, but when you actually get there, the Shade Lord comes out and he just rips her apart, and it's brutal, and I feel bad for her, because she's like... I mean, she's evil. She's messed up herself. But Jesus Christ, this is kind of hard to watch. And then he just takes over everything, and it's not presented in a happy way either. It's presented as if this is a villainous, terrible thing that's happening, and hopefully that's something that they get into in Silk Song. I hope. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how you're basically it's a weird thing, because the void, like I say, the void is not a good thing, but it's not the villain of the story. So it's more like with what you're doing in as you're playing through the game is you have to use the void, because the whole point of getting to the true ending is you get the void heart. You have to use the void and sort of ally with the void to defeat the Radiance, who's the villain, even though the void itself is also not a good, you know, it's also not a good entity in this sense. But you need it because only its power can end up vanquishing the Radiance, which has gone, like, out of control. So yeah, I really like the whole idea with the Void. I hope that they go into the Void more with Silk Song and even future games. It's really interesting. The concept of the Void's really interesting to me, because it's just like, it's this force of nature type of evil, rather than a direct, like, mwahaha, I am mad and I'm going to destroy things, which is what the Radiance is. I guess we could talk about the Radiance now. Like I said, I feel bad for the Radiance. Her whole thing, well, I mean, I guess I mentioned her already. What I want to say, what's really cool is how you actually end up fighting her, because you visit the dream world multiple times and you see, like, the light in the dream world. It's very bright in there. It only becomes dark in there after you unlock the Shade Lord at the end of the Godmaster DLC. You see the sun multiple times, and it's not until the final fight where you go in, when you dream nail into the Hollow Knight, that you go in and you have to, it's so cool because you have to jump up those platforms and challenge it, and only then you see the sun, like, unfurl its wings and radiance. It's one of the most, it's like an amazing ramp up to that battle. And like the music that's playing as you have to jump up the platforms while it's trying to shoot you, the whole thing is really, really epic, and I love it. It's such a well-presented fight. Now this puts this puts some of the questions of what the goal of stopping the Radiance is, because, well, like to what end are you trying to stop the Radiance? Because obviously the Hallownest is dead. Most of the people that were in Hallownest are gone. The Radiance has already done its damage, you know? I mean, the White Lady is concerned, and she gives you the King Soul because she doesn't want the Radiance to take over everything. Presumably, the Radiance's infection would destroy her as well, eventually. And everyone else, and the Mantises, and you know, the what's left, the barbarians, whoever's in Deep Nest, everyone. So just because it's a force that's trying to just annihilate everything, you need to stop it. And the White Lady suggests that you replace it. So it's weird. I guess I could talk about the endings here as well, because it's weird how the replacing the Hollow Knight is deemed as the bad ending, even though it's what would prevent the Radiance from spreading. You could make the argument the reason it's the bad ending is because the same thing would have happened to the Child Knight as what happened to the Hollow Knight. His mask would eventually crack, and the Radiance would have eventually taken over, and the same thing would have happened. The reason I bring this up, though, it's not about that. It's more about who cares if the Radiance wins. I mean, civilization's already dead, right? I mean, I guess you could make the argument, like I said, that there are other beings and there's potentially other kingdoms as well, which I guess there are, because we're going to see them in Hornets DLC, right? Sorry, in Hornets, in Silksong. So it's questionable whether or not the whole Radiance... So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's framed in an interesting way, because you are trying to stop the Radiance, but you're not necessarily trying to stop her to save the people who are still alive. It's not framed that way because you're not really fighting or doing things for the people who are still alive. You do help them here and there, and they do contribute, and they are sort of part of the story. You know, you can give them flour, etc. You can assist them, but they aren't the point. The point more so is to, like, the point more has to do with what you're trying to do in resolving the Pale King's quest to try and stop the Radiance in the first place, more so than saving the people who are still alive. Although, if you think about it, that is a very legitimate motivation. Like, trying to save what's left of civilization from the Radiance, who's just out to destroy it. And of course, you need the Void to do it. Now, yeah, I guess that's the way you have to think about it. Otherwise there's no point. If civilization's completely gone, if everyone's dead, who cares if you stop the Radiance at that point? You know, it's like they're either everyone's dead anyway. Who cares if the Radiance infects everyone who, you know, who cares if the people who aren't dead are infected? I mean, at that point, there's no point. At that point, it doesn't matter. It's basically, the point is, like, somebody has to be alive or somebody has to stay alive. There has to be, like, a narrative and a story that keeps going for there to be a reason to do anything, which is why it's the whole idea of the Radiance threatening civilization that's still there is more of an obvious motivation than stopping the Radiance when civilization's essentially on the brink of destruction. But I guess it's weird, because they don't really go into what remains of civilization as a whole. They don't talk about that. They just present you with Hallownest as decaying and decrepit and ruined, a few bugs still alive, and the Radiance as still a thing that's a threat. So I'm just trying to understand what's really canon here, and I guess you have to think of canon as the Radiance is still threatening things that are alive, and you have to stop it for that reason. Well, there's also another reason that I'll get to later, but that is one of the big reasons. So let's move on. So I know I'm jumping around with the whole thing, but it's like, this is one of the issues with this indirect style of storytelling, is you don't actually necessarily know what happens. Now, what you do know is what you discover, and with something that's presented to you from the, you know, the beginning of the game, actually, anytime the screen lights up: Soul of Worm, Soul of Root, Heart of Void. Now, what that means is you are the child of the Pale King, the White Lady, and the Void. And this is something that's emphasized throughout the game, right? This is why you have, this is why that line shows up on your screen multiple times. This is why, that line shows up on your screen multiple times. This is why your soul meter is 1/3 depleted if you die, because you lose your void part and your shade is out there somewhere and you have to go find your shade. But the other 2/3 are full because that's your soul. So it's like, and if you think about void, void is not a replacement for soul, right? And when you get your sort of the void upgrades to all your spells, void just kind of enhances soul. So it enhances the abilities that you would already have with soul. And you actually get soul when you hit some of the void enemies that are in the White Palace as well. So it's clear that, like, it's clear that the 2/3 soul, 1/3 void thing is a consistent thing with the identity of your character itself. On top of that, in order to get to the true ending, you need to collect the King's Soul, which is 2 parts, and then convert that into the Heart of Void, which is 1 part. So again, it's like the 2/3 soul, 1/3 void thing is consistent throughout the whole thing. That's who your character is. You are 2/3 soul, 1/3 void, and all of the siblings in the Abyss are the exact same thing. Children of the Pale King and the White Lady that were mixed somehow with void in the life-creating process, because the Pale King was experimenting with void, and then as an attempt to create vessels to use to contain the radiance. That's the whole idea with what happens in the story. That's what makes things... So that sets things up in an interesting way, because you have... Of course, I'm losing my thoughts at this point. Holy shit. So they were... What Pale King was doing, he was experimenting with void, and he was doing all kinds of things with void, like creating King's Mold and Wing's Mold, and he created the Collector as well. And then they were trying to do this with their children, and it's weird. First of all, this is what you mean by like the lengths to which they went to try and preserve their civilization. And you know that then that's like, this is why the Hornet is your half sister, because she's the Pale King's daughter because of a dalliance that he had with Hera the Beast. So this is the big like reveal of the story that you find out as you go through. It's like, this is actually, and it actually makes the final scene where you fight Hollow Knight quite Shakespearean, because you have, like, you're literally fighting your brother, and then your sister jumps in and hits him with her like with her needle thing as you're dream nailing him. It's this whole like Shakespearean kind of like fun moment as you're trying to get through to him so that you can defeat the Radiance. It's a cool, neat little moment. A lot of this stuff would have even been more powerful if it were presented in a way that was direct, but I guess that's the whole idea of the game, is that it can't be direct. That brings me to a point, is like, why exactly is the Hollow Knight stabbing himself? I've heard it theorized that the reason he's stabbing himself is because he's actually trying to help you out. And in the Dream No More ending, his shade shows up to help you whack the Radiance at the very end, which is cool, and it makes a lot of sense that he would do that. So that means that part of him is still in there somewhere, but most of him is infected and trying to kill you. That the part of him that's infected is trying to do that. But every once in a while, he like realizes who he is and starts stabbing himself to help you. I also thought maybe the reason he was doing that is he was stabbing himself to let more of like the infection out to help fight you. I don't know. I guess that's another theory, but I think I like the idea that he's fighting for control more. So yeah, so the whole point of the game then, as I mentioned, is like, as you learn your identity, the whole progression of the game is you learn about your identity, you learn what happened with Hallow Nest, you learn about Hallow Nest history, you learn your identity as 2 parts soul, 1 part void, and then you unify the void underneath your will. And then you actually get to stop the Radiance, which is deemed to be the good ending. Because, presumably, of course, like I said, like I just mentioned, just sealing the Radiance away, while perhaps you are, you know, truly, because the Hollow Knight was not truly hollow, you might actually be more successful at that than he does. But again, we don't actually, there's no guarantee with that, and we don't know how powerful the Radiance is. It's possible that the same thing would happen. The mask would break, the Radiance would break out, and everything would happen all over the place. But it's only because you manage to unify the void under your will that you're able to actually go into the Hollow Knight's dream, go into the part of the dream world that the Hollow Knight was basically operating in, or where the Hollow Knight had sealed the Radiance, get in there and challenge the Radiance directly, and bring the void bring the void with you, which is why the siblings stop attacking you after you unified the void. They come with you, and with the power of the void put together, you are finally able to stop the Radiance, and thus, you know, end the cycle and, you know, put an end to the Radiance and all of her terrible influence. that's the basic arc. Now, the interesting about how this comes across is the way in which you unify the void to begin with. I was trying to understand, because like a lot of the things in the game felt arbitrary to me for the first time. I didn't actually understand why, like if the whole idea is that the Hollow Knight was designed to not to preserve the Radiance, but to seal her, why exactly would that, like, why exactly would you do that when you can just go into the Radiance's mind, when you can just go into the dream world and challenge the Radiance directly and destroy her, right? But of course the reason is because, no, you need to unify the void. The only reason the character is able to do that is because the entirety of the void is on your side when you're doing that. It's like you're able to, the way I understand the void, right? The void is not a direct conscious being that's trying to do things like the Radiance or the gods or anyone. The void is just this kind of like force of nature that's quasi sort of pseudo and has a pseudo intelligence to it. It's like it has the capacity for intelligence, but it's not a direct centralized intelligence. What ends up happening when you unify the void is you end up giving it focus and thus making it like a centralized, like sort of, it ends up operating like it's got a centralized intelligence, and you end up, the void ends up functioning like one collective, cohesive unit, and only then can it actually challenge and defeat the Radiance. Now, one thing that's interesting is why this happens. People have speculated that, like, the point that this happens is when you get the Void Heart, and even says the Void Heart unifies the void under your will. This happens when you go through that dream sequence in Birthplace, which is obviously your birthplace. Now, when this was first explained to me, I found it really weird, because the way that it's presented is it's like, what happens is you dream nail your reflection and go into your own memories and figure out what happened. And once you learn who you are, that unifies the void. But I always found that to be weird and arbitrary, because, like, why would the child knight need to learn about his own past in order to unify the void? Like, why would the act of doing that unify the void? That's what was strange to me. Like, it comes down to, like, how does the void work? And why wouldn't the child knight already have those memories, right? I mean, the child knight is a child, but the child knight remembers being created, right? This comes into the question as to where exactly does the child knight come from? Why is he walking around in the Howling Cliffs at the beginning of the game, right? Where did he come from? And why isn't he as old as the Hollow Knight? Weird questions that don't necessarily have answers. And as far as dream nailing yourself, why exactly is Birthplace the only place you could do that? I mean, presumably you could do that in any place in the main world where there's a reflection, right? Why do you need to go down into that dark egg that's in Birthplace, right? And what is that? Is that is the egg where you were born, presumably, that you were born from? I don't know. It's weird. But my theory as to what was happening is that I don't think you're dream nailing into, you're not going into your own mind there. You're dream nailing the void itself. That's how I understood that. You're dreaming, the reflection thing was just a narrative thing. It's like the idea is that you're learning about your own past when you do this, because this was where you were created. But the actual entity that's being dream nailed is the void itself. And you're going through the void's memories because the void, by virtue of its pseudo kind of intelligence, it has the sense of memory within it, right? It contains memories. And so it contains the memories of all the corpses falling in the abyss as the Pale King was trying to construct the vessel. And that's where you learn your relationship with the Hollow Knight as a sibling. And the thing is, it's by doing this that you're able to unify the void. That's my headcanon explanation for it. It's by trying to get into the void's mind, or get into what basically the sort of non-centralized liquid form of the void's memories, that you end up taking all those memories and giving them focus. So perhaps the void, if you think about it, perhaps the void is not a being at all. It's not a living being at all. The void is more just like this this kind of like this kind of reflexive repository of memories. In other words, the void just takes on the emotions and the memories of whatever lingers in the area. And so that's why it has all the memory of all the children and all that the Pale King created. And so what happens when you tap into that is that's what gives the void character. The void is not an actual living thing. It just takes on, it's like, a weird example of this is it's like a tumor. If you've seen the movie Annihilation, there's a weird parallel between what the void is and what happens in that movie. But in the movie of Annihilation, there's this entity, this alien entity that basically just creates like it takes on, like, this is a sci-fi movie. It takes on anything that's, or the information of anything that's around, and just tries to like reconstruct it in a different way, you know, kind of like a tumor would. But yeah, that's what the being in the Annihilation does. That's how I understand the void. The void is an alien thing that just takes on the identity and the information of all the beings around it, and their memories as well. And the character and the psychology of it reflects the character and psychology of the individuals and the events themselves. So the reason that the Shade Lord, I guess, is the way that the Shade Lord is, the reason that the Shade Lord is created when all the collective memories of all the dead siblings come together, is because the Shade Lord is a personification of the horror that went down when Hallownest was falling. In order to preserve it, that it's the memories and the pain and all that struggle put together and personified in a single form. That's what the Shade Lord is, right? But of course, in the Dream No More ending, you don't get the Shade Lord, you get a more casual form of the Shade Lord, which is just the voids unified under your will, and you're able to, you know, you're able to sort of like pull the void along with you, like along a rope, and essentially bring it with you to take down this fucking crazy being called the Radiance and finally defeat it. But in the Godmaster DLC, it goes a step further, where it like, there's a sense of progression with the void. There's the void just as a basic, you know, decentralized being, as with all its consciousness, the void given form in like the void given form. This also actually explains a lot of things with why different void beings have different personalities, like the Collector. The void having form of specific personalities, or having, you know, a mask like a bug, you know, so it's being part bug, part void, then the void itself having more, you know, in the Dream, like in the Dream No More ending, the void as a collective body taking on the will and the character of the Child Knight, to the point where the void actually collapses and becomes completely centralized as the Shade Lord in the final ending in the Godmaster DLC. So that's my theory as to what the void really is, and I think it's because you dream nailed it and gave it that information, or at least I don't know. It's hard to explain my idea, but I guess the point is, like, by accessing the void through the dream world the way that you did, you were able to basically open up a passageway in its like neural processing or whatever that made it turn into this thing and made it like collapse, basically made it personify the interests of this force that's trying to take down the Radiance, by giving it that information of who you were as a void being yourself. So that's my rant about that. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess we could talk about like the endings and the themes here, just to finish off. Like I said, the replacing the normal ending, the bad ending, doesn't seem that bad at first glance if you think that it actually does work in replacing the Radiance. So there's mixed signals as to how hollow the Hollow Knight really is. The idea is that the Hollow Knight wasn't truly hollow, but that the Child Knight might actually be truly hollow. And if the Child Knight is truly hollow, then the Child Knight could very well replace the Hollow Knight, right? It's debatable whether or not that would work, I guess, which is what I already mentioned. I already talked about that. More thorough solution is enlisting the help of the void and unifying it under your will to defeat it, And the ultimate solution, which is I think is the canonical ending, which is the embrace the void ending, it's where you completely embrace the void and you give it the void focus, which creates the Shade Lord, which I claim is the void's property of like reflexively taking on the character of the beings around it and the experiences that happen. It makes it have this character of this evil, crazy monster that this evil, crazy monster is the personification of the pain and the struggle and all the horror that happened during the fall of Hallownest, that it becomes this thing that destroys the Radiance completely, just eats her alive, and takes over the entire dream world and could easily be the villain in the next game. That's what happens in that ending. So let's talk about themes. It's and the ethics of all this as well. It's pretty clear that like what the Hollow Knight's major theme throughout the whole thing is the idea of dealing with loss, dealing with death, and moving on, basically. That's the general sense that I get from it. That's the general like experiential character of this stuff. A lot of what you're dealing with is remembering the past, dealing with the past, and then ultimately moving on from the past. A lot of what you encounter are dreamers, right? You know, ancient spirits, warriors who you're supposed to release and take on their soul essence, and it's presented in a way where you're helping them move on. This also happens in Quirrell's little story. Quirrell is one of the random NPCs. He walks around with you. He helps you fight Umu and free the second dreamer. And at the end of the game, there's this nice, well, not the end of the game, but throughout the game, there's this nice period where you finally find him sitting at the edge of the Blue Lake. And he's just sitting there chilling. And he mentions how the last thing he wanted to do before he died was to see where the tears in the City of Tears came from. And you get to just sit down with him, and then you walk away. You come back and he just disappears. I mean, I'm pretty sure his sword and mask are still there, but he's totally gone. And it ties into the whole idea of moving on when you're ready. You know, he was there, he served his purpose, he helped you fulfill your role, and now it's his time to move on. And it also adds to the thing because the whole villain of the story, which is the Radiance, is a villain because she could not move on, right? Her people worshipped her, then the Pale King came in, and she was spurned. She felt cheated, and she could not move on from that. So she just kept raging and raging about it, and it made bad thing after bad thing happen, which first of all destroyed Hallownest, ruined everybody's life. But it also didn't actually fix anything because the Radiance, she didn't get to have her little moth tribe back, right? Nothing was fixed. She didn't get to have her world back. It just made everything worse. The idea with the Radiance and the Radiance's villainy, I think, is that the Radiance was so mad, so angry, so furious over having been forgotten that she could not let go. And her not letting go created tons of problems for everyone else. She could not move on, and her not being able to move on was the problem, and that's why it's framed as the bad thing. You could also argue that, of course, what the Pale King did was not being able to move on by trying to perpetuate Hallownest in the first place. This is where we get into a weird, well, this is where things get a little weird, and the lack of directness in the story makes things complicated. But, of course, on the one hand, what the Pale King and the Soul Master did to try to perpetuate Hallownest is not quite the same thing. Obviously, they're doing it because they're trying to respond to a threat which is created by the Radiance. Like, they're trying to preserve their civilization. I mean, you kind of understand what they're doing. It's not... I mean, what they did ended up having pretty sick results. Well, with the Soul Master, it ended up having sick results. With the... Pale King's experiments on Void, it had really twisted results that were very dangerous because the Void's very dangerous. They weren't necessarily that sad. I mean, if you look at... I know I'm jumping around here, but if you think about the ethics of it, you realize that the children of the Void, Pale King, and White Lady didn't have any feelings. They were designed as tools, but it's also like they couldn't actually scream or feel pain. So on the one hand, it's kind of twisted what they're doing because they're creating their children not as children, they're creating them as these like tools to defeat the Void, which is fucked up. But also from a purely utilitarian perspective, their children aren't really suffering, right? Because they don't have, they don't feel pain. So it's not necessarily like they're making a bad thing. Like they're doing something that's pure evil. But it still has that kind of twisted character. Nonetheless, I'd say what Pale King and White Lady and Soul Master did was not in the same. It's not in the same. Like, it doesn't have the same exact character as what the Radiance was doing by not being able to move on, because she couldn't move on when she had to because her time was over. And she tried to ruin things for them. It's not necessarily wrong for them to try to preserve their civilization. Like, wouldn't you try to preserve your civilization if it was threatened? Probably. I think most of us would. Sorry. Yeah, most of us probably would, right? So I think that, like, there is an argument to be made that what they did, while it was fucked up and it's in the means, there's an ends over means argument that can be made for it, right? At the very least, their problem wasn't that they couldn't move on. This is where we get into a philosophical discussion as to when exactly is it appropriate to move on and accept death and when is it not. There's lots of places and times and opportunities where that is a good thing. It's a good thing when it's something that makes sense. It makes sense when death is inevitable. It makes sense when your time has come. It makes sense when you've served your purpose, which is exactly what happened with Quirrell. He served his purpose and then he died, or he disappeared. It's possible that he entered the dream world. We don't know. Anyway, it's possible when you've served your purpose. It's also possible when you realize that there's nothing except pain. You realize there's nothing left except pain. All you can do is minimize the pain. That's another time when it makes sense to move on. That's another, when the utilitarian reality reduces down to that simple formula. There's nothing left before you but pain. There's no reason to keep doing what you're doing. There's no reason to try. There's no reason to try to make things better because you know it's over. There's a moment there where it is appropriate to basically give up. That is true. I do think that that's true in certain cases. Like I said, when death is inevitable. In those cases, you can move on from trying to hold on to something like hold on to create something. But the other times it's fair to move on is, it's okay to move on when there's something you're moving on to, something greater. It's all like there's a lot of different factors and ways of seeing it. So the important thing is to know how to balance these things out. Obviously, you could make the argument that the Pale King should have just moved on from the beginning, right? He should never have created Hallownest in the first place, but that's hardly fair. I mean, he didn't do anything wrong by creating Hallownest. He arguably did something wrong by trying to preserve it the way that he did, but I would still say that that's more his reaction to the Radiance, who couldn't move on when she was supposed to, right? So it's not that the Pale King necessarily did something wrong, it's that the Radiance was doing something wrong and he was just reacting to her wrongness. And then there you have the position that, like, someone, someone being wrong, one form of wrongness propagates another. One person being wrong forces another person to be wrong to have to sort of combat them. You have that whole thing. Again, I'm reading really deep into it. None of this stuff is necessarily that present in the game, but this kind of ethical discussion is relevant, and I feel like it is relevant with the idea of life and death in general. It's very easy to think that it's just one thing and not the other. You could very easily say, well, we should always try to move forward and make things better. Yeah, but sometimes that is just an unhealthy attachment towards something that's not real, right? Which I guess is exactly what the Radiance was doing. Sometimes that's an unhealthy obsession with something that's not real, but you want to pretend like it is because moving on is harder. Sometimes you're too scared to move on because the idea of death and letting go of what's real, what feels real and tangible and good and precious is too painful. Okay, sometimes you're wrong for not moving on, basically. And other times moving on is the right thing to do because you've already done everything. You've done your part. You've done everything you could. You've done the most that you can. There's nothing left except pain. You've basically done enough. You've had your fill of goodness or whatever it is, and it's time to throw in the towel and basically give up. But other times, of course, the situation is reversed. Very easily, you could very easily give up too early, give up far too early before you've done anything. And of course, when the system, ethically, when you have all this potential, when you can build this great kingdom of Hallownest, there's no reason to give up when that's possible. And when you can save it, that's also reasonable. And when you have the ability to save it, it's also no reason to give it up. Well, there's not enough of a reason to give it up, at least, because you could save it. So it all depends on the context. So it's very complicated. But what the game definitely tries to bring forward is this concept of, like, sometimes it is fair to move on and accept that life life has done its thing, and it's time to move on to the next thing, and it's time to let go and basically embrace death. Not embrace death, but basically it's not so much about embracing death as much as it is about no longer having to desperately and deludedly and dangerously and crazily hold on to life in a way where it's unhealthy. That's how this whole schema supposedly works. And that's also one way to really understand what you do with the difference between destroying the Radiance and perpetuating the cycle by taking over your role as the Hollow Knight, which is that by continuing the cycle, you are perpetuating the Hallownest, essentially. It's like you're trying to perpetuate Hallownest. Because what you're doing is you're perpetuating the Pale King's efforts into trying to perpetuate Hallownest. But it's clear that there's no point. Hallownest is already done, right? Hallownest is over, right? There's no reason to try to keep this thing going. It's done, and it's time to move on to something else. Whoever's left, the other. If you want to think about it, like, there's other living beings out there that's their turn to have their time. They can build a new kingdom, and it sucks that Hallownest had to die. It sucks because it was a great kingdom, but as it turns out, the Radiance, by virtue of her not being able to let go, was just too much, and it was too destructive, and Hallownest was destroyed, and it sucks, but that's the reality, and we have to accept that and move on. And I think one way to think of, like, the difference between the bad ending and the good ending is that by killing the Radiance, as opposed to sealing it away, is symbolic, as it's you putting an end to the Pale King's efforts of trying to preserve Hallownest. And it's this really, by killing the Radiance and the Hollow Knight, fundamentally seals the end for Hallownest. This is the last moment of Hallownest right here, where this is sort of you saw the kingdom, you experienced it, you experienced its memories, you checkmarked it, you underlined it, you completed it, and now it's time to go. And now it's time to let go. And so we, as a last little symbolic goodbye, we bury it, basically. We bury it and move on. By destroying the thing that was ultimately responsible for its fall to begin with, but also the thing that the last remaining, but also by eliminating the Hollow Knight as the last remaining pillar of this once great kingdom, we flip it over as, like, it's kind of like, the way to think about it, it's like, imagine you're walking through this, like, ruin of an ancient kingdom, and there's one pillar that's standing up just normally, and you just, like, tip it over, and now that's it. Now that's the end. It's done. That's the one way to interpret it. The difference between the bad ending and the good ending. Of course, as far as life in general is concerned, stopping the Radiance is always the right choice because the Radiance is always a threat. Anyway, that's basically my QA. God, this was a huge rant. Hopefully, I covered everything. I definitely covered everything. Hopefully, I did it in a way that made sense to people. Hopefully, I did it in a way that was sufficiently succinct and covers all the points. And thank you for watching. Farewell. And I'm looking forward to Silksong.